Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Justin, and today we'll be reviewing the pilot episode of The Twilight Zone called Where Is Everybody? It initially aired on CBS on October 2nd, 1959, and was written by Rod Serling, and it stars Earl Holliman, who at the time of this recording is still alive at age 95, which is really incredible. Among the many interesting things about this episode, one thing is that it's not very supernatural compared to many of the other episodes that were aired on the series. This one is a bit more straightforward and science-based, and I think the reason for that is due to, since this was being pitched to the network, they didn't want it to seem a little too weird, and I guess if they had gone with something more supernatural or terrifying, it might not have ever been picked up, so I don't blame them. But I have heard that there is an alternate ending that I don't want to spoil right now, but if it was included, I think that would have been a really cool alternate ending that would have made it a little bit creepier and a little bit more supernatural feeling. But I can understand with this first episode having to tread lightly. This episode actually featured a different voice actor for the famous opening lines that everyone knows. Rod Serling says, but a man named Westbrook Van Voorhis, I hope I'm saying that right, was the original narrator. However, he couldn't stick around for all of the future episodes, and so they went with Rod Serling. There are a few key differences there, not only in the voice itself, but the words being spoken. Serling changed the line, the sunlight of his knowledge, to the summit of his knowledge. And he also changed the line from in an area we might call the Twilight Zone to an area in which we call the Twilight Zone. So I'm glad they made a final decision on what to call it. And they added a line that the Twilight Zone is the middle ground between science and superstition. And also with the original narrator, they said that when they listened back, he sounded a little bit too pompous. The original pilot episode was a completely different story, which revolved around a society that executed their citizens once they turned 60 due to no longer being useful, and that was probably a little bit too much for the network at the time too. And Serling chose the name Twilight Zone thinking he had made it up himself, but he later found out that it is actually a term that the Air Force uses when a plane is about to come down and it's having trouble seeing over the horizon or something to that extent. Almost everybody on board wanted to have Orson Welles be the narrator, but his asking price was way too much and it would have put the show way over budget.
Which we call the Twilight Zone.
Alright, and here we are introduced to our main character, Mike Ferris. He's walking down this empty road and he's not sure where he is. So he finds this cafe and he goes inside. It's blaring music from this jukebox. He doesn't see anyone else around. He wants to get some service. He wants to get some food, and he can't find anyone. And when you see a boiling teapot, I mean, how else would that be there without someone actually turning that on? So he must be starting to feel pretty creeped out. And then he bumps this clock, and the clock falls down and breaks, and there's going to be some significance to that later on. So he sees the money in his pocket, and that reassures him that he's an American. He doesn't know his name, where he came from, anything else about himself, but he knows he's an American, which is kind of funny because, this guy likes to talk a lot, obviously, and you'd think that he would have noticed his own accent. Granted, not a lot of people talk like that anymore with that transatlantic accent, which is awesome. But so at least he's starting to put some pieces together. So now he's thinking this is all a dream, and he's going to continue on in this dream to see if he'll wake up or if he'll find anyone else. And I like that little touch where he changes the sign to closed, like, nope, no one's here, as if maybe he's going to help out the next person that comes by. So now he enters this town square and he hears this church bell ringing, and he's wondering, is there anyone ringing that bell, or Is it just ringing on its own? But again, another sign of life, but there's just no person there to be found, just the sound of the bell. And so he's going through all these empty stores, again, no one to be found at all, and then he spots this woman in this car. And I love the way that they chose to not really show you her close up until that final moment there, where we just kind of see his back as he walks to her, and in his feeling of desperation and loneliness now, he's probably on the verge of hallucinating. So I think most people would go like, yeah, you can tell it's a mannequin right away, but I think they're implying that his state of mind is just starting to really transform, and he's starting to see things maybe. And so by coincidence, he finds the one mannequin store in all of town, and all the mannequins are left out for some reason. So even though most episodes of The Twilight Zone were filmed at MGM Studios, this one was actually filmed at the Universal Studios lot. And you'll notice this is the courthouse square that's been featured in a lot of productions, but notably, for me at least, is Back to the Future. And being that I'm such a huge fan of Back to the Future, I think it's really cool to see that in both The Twilight Zone and that movie. No key in the car, so he can't drive away. Okay, well, someone has to be calling, right? The phone booth's not going to just ring on its own. And that's just some great acting on the part of Earl Hallman there too. I love how his face goes from this like joyous look when he first hears the voice to quickly just a look of despair when he realizes that it's not an actual person, it's just a recording. So he finds the phone book, he sees the name of the town, but then he's kind of realizing, again, I guess, that no one's watching the town. And so that phone booth scene there is actually based on a real experience from Rod Serling's life. He said that he was at an airport once and the loudspeaker came on and said it was time for him to board his plane, and he started to panic and tried to get out, but he kept pushing and pushing until finally a man came over to help him, and that's when he realized it was a pull door, much like Mike Ferris did here too. But in the context of the episode, I think it works very well with showing the anxiety and the fears that just keep rising and rising in him as he's going along. Definitely, if the world had gone mad and all the people disappearing, you would think that the one place where people might still be trying to restore some law and order is the police station. So at this point, he's starting to have the feeling that he's being watched. He's had the teapot boil over, had the phone booth ringing, the bells chiming, the jukebox, all these strange things happening are starting to make him feel like someone's out there watching him, but he can't see them. And I love how he gets on the police radio, and at this point he's ready to be considered a fugitive, just so that someone will come find him. And then we see the billowing smoke, and it's a lit cigar. So just like the teapot, a cigar is not going to light itself, right? So very strange indeed. I actually just noticed there too the shaving cream on the brush, which if anyone has ever shaved before, you would know that stuff would harden and dry out within a matter of hours. So the fact that it's still really fresh on the brush is another really weird thing. So the jailhouse door starts to close on him and the music starts to swell, and that's when he's about to reach the peak of his anxiety, and he runs out and screams the title of the episode. So he's calmed down a little bit, and now he's found a ice cream parlor, or soda fountain, I think they would call him. And I think he's still hungry from earlier. He never got his ham and eggs, I think he wanted. So hey, at least he's found a place where he can get some ice cream to hold him over. So I can imagine trying to film something like this with a huge mirror like that as being an obstacle too, that I just thought about. So good work on them for that. But in this scene, he's finally seen his own reflection. So that's the first person he's seen in a technical sense. So of course he starts talking to himself, and he starts to quote Charles Dickens. And basically what he's saying with that is, he thinks that he's having a nightmare from eating some sort of spoiled food for dinner, or some sort of food that didn't sit well with him, that's causing these nightmares to occur. And he just wants to wake up from this really lucid dream that he's experiencing. He's just noticing how really detailed this dream is too. I would love to see exactly all the book titles on there. And so all these books called The Last Man on Earth are there, just another coincidence. It's like whoever's watching him and looking over him, they're just throwing it in his face. At this point they're taunting him, making him think he's the last man on Earth with that book. So even in black and white, we can tell that it's changed from daytime to nighttime. So he spent the whole day, I'm assuming, since he wanted ham and eggs, probably from breakfast to dinner time now, trying to find someone, and he's gotten so bored that he's playing tic-tac-toe in the sand. And so all of a sudden, all of the lights come on in the town, and he notices the theater is all brightly lit up and flashing at him, and he goes over to check it out, and they're playing the movie Battle Hymn. And that's when he sees that photo and realizes that he's wearing the same type of outfit, and that's when he knows he's in the Air Force. So he has this huge revelation finally. So he's so happy to have figured out that he's in the Air Force that he's yelling and screaming it in the theater, even though he should know by now that it's probably not going to get a response. And then he starts to think that maybe they had dropped an atomic or nuclear weapon, which was, of course, a very big fear in the 1950s especially. And then he says no, everything would be destroyed. And then he kind of notices the lights change behind him. As a former projectionist, I can tell you that it's hard enough to just get a projector to start, let alone string a film reel through it. So again, to see a movie just start playing like that, I mean, at this point, there's no way all these little strange coincidences would still be happening without people behind it, right? So he starts running down, and then we get one of the best scenes in the whole show where he slams into the mirror and it breaks and he falls. And you have those moments where like everything feels like it's going bad, and you're just like super stressed out about it, and you start trying to just get out of the situation, and then something else happens, like you trip over a bike. You just relate to that moment too, where you're like, man, it's something else now too, what? But he's basically lost it, and he just wants to get out of there. He's just starting to run. I don't think he knows where he's going, but at this point he has no other options, so he just starts to run. And so he sees that ominous all-seeing eye, but it's just the optometrist, which is pretty funny. And then he makes it to a crosswalk. And if there's one thing we all know, if you're in trouble, pressing the button on the crosswalk will get you someone there in a hurry, right? So obviously I don't know why pressing the crosswalk button would finally solve everything, but maybe he's just sort of like just wants to press a button for anxiety relief or something, I don't know. So yeah, obviously he wasn't pressing the crosswalk button at all. He was pressing the panic button, and we get that really cool reveal where the audio of his voice changes over even to sound more like it was phoned in. And then we see everyone is watching him, and he's in this isolation booth, this box thing with all these wires. And then it pans in on him, and if you notice, he's broken the clock, which we saw earlier at the diner too. So that's a really cool little tie-in that was something kind of small you might have missed, but is really cool. Interesting to me that the press were just sitting there waiting for this to happen. I mean, obviously they have to push the story forward and get them to come into the scene somehow so that we can get our explanation of the episode, basically. But it's kind of funny to think. So this guy was in this isolation booth, and he was supposed to be staying there for just how long? Like much longer than he was. So the press was either just sitting there waiting, or they had like a special line, just let us know as soon as he's out. We need to know right away. Like, no time wasted. So it's kind of a weird thing. So this episode from 1959, just like all of the episodes up until 1963, I think, is the end of the series. The whole space race and all of the space exploration stuff was huge on the minds of people everywhere. Not to mention, science fiction had been talking about that stuff since like Jules Verne and well before then. So it's interesting for them to kind of speculate what a trip to the moon would have been like, and just being all by yourself for that long, and what that would do to a person. Because I don't think anyone's ever been isolated that long, without any human contact before. So maybe that explains why the press was so interested in hearing about it.
What was it like, Ferris? Where did you think you were? A place I don't want to go again.
And so one of the most enduring aspects of Twilight Zone as a whole, and the reason that I love it much personally, is that yes, we have the sci-fi elements, the sci-fi themes, but really Rod Serling's just the master of getting down to the human condition and showing us through a different means. And by that I mean he's talking about just the isolation and loneliness, and how there's never going to be a way that we can use technology to get rid of that feeling in our lives, which is kind of really apt for our current society too, if you think about how much we are on our computers and phones and still feeling lonely. So there's always like a moral to the story, an undertone to social commentary, even though it's talking about a trip to outer space, right? He's actually talking about the human condition. Those are some gigantic doors.
Go way up there in the Twilight Zone.
So there you have it. That's the whole first episode, and I enjoy it. I think they did a good job. Obviously, it has some flaws. He talks way more than you'd expect a normal person to talk, but I think given the scenario that they're trying to work with, they kind of needed him to provide more dialogue. Otherwise, it would just be a guy walking around in this empty town not saying anything, which would work too, but maybe it would just not keep the audience's attention as much. Maybe they didn't trust the audience as much to go with that. Rod Serling later on said he didn't really care for the episode that much, and that it didn't really age like fine wine. And he was most dissatisfied with the straightforward ending to it. Like I said before, there was possibly an ending where he would have had a a ticket from the movie theater in his pocket that would have been revealed at the end, which would have left a lot more unanswered questions. But he felt like he had to explain the episode for the network executives, so we're kind of getting this watered down version so that they would pick it up and actually, run with the series. And again, it is what it is because it got the show on the air and they were able to make 155 more episodes that some of them do get really dark and weird and some of the scariest TV you'll ever see. So it did its job, right? Serling also said that he would have liked to had a scene in the diner where Mike sees an apron kind of moving around behind the counter, behind a doorway, and as he gets closer to it, it's revealed that the apron is being blown by a fan, which that would have been pretty cool too, to add another element of a person being there, but not really. But up until this point, Rod Serling had a pretty good career, and they were trusting that the show would do well, even though they knew that it was going to be a lot more episodes with scripts that they hadn't read yet, and they don't know who the actors are going to be. So I guess in some ways we're lucky that the show even got picked up at all. Alright, well that's my review and commentary, and I hope you enjoyed that. But I think I've seen so many Twilight Zone episodes that maybe instead of doing reactions, maybe I should just review the whole series. I think that would be a lot of fun for me. And then once we get through that, maybe get into all the other 80s and 2000s series, the movies, Night Gallery. So there's a lot that you can get into off of the Twilight Zone branch, so to speak. A lot more from there too. So be sure to subscribe and keep coming back for more of these Twilight Zone reviews. Alright, see you next time.